was hiding away. For a minute I was thinking I couldn't be saved, but just like a prayer, you were right there. Yeah, you were always right there. In the back seat of my fears I found you. Now I know I couldn't live without you. That's all I need, a reminder that I could be free. So turning the page is let go of the feeling that kept me from healing. It's so clear to see I was waiting on me to be me. Found a voice, it was calling in the night because of the noise. And I knew it must be right, cause it was mine. And what's mine is yours. Yours. In the backseat of my fears I found you. Now I know I couldn't live without. That's all I need, a reminder that I could be free. So turning the page is let go of the feeling.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. We encourage you to chat throughout the session and use emojis to react to content. Test them now. Questions should be entered in the Q&A tab. The upvote feature is available, so give a thumbs up to push questions you like to the top of the list. If you are looking for information or resources, refer to the space below your video window. For further assistance, click the help bot at the bottom of your page. All right, let's get started.
Sawadee ka, greetings industry colleagues, and happy year. My name is Felix Tsibatis, and I'm the North American representative for the Thailand Convention Exhibition Bureau. On behalf of TCEP, I'm delighted to welcome you to this session. As we all know, the past year has not been easy on us, yet TCEP undertook a proactive approach to redefine our convention strategy so that we can strengthen Thailand's position as a preferred convention destination in Asia and continue to evolve within the changing landscape of the events industry. And so the current session, Navigating an Uncertain Present and Building for a Better Future, resonates with TCEP. We hope you enjoyed this session. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. This is Pascal Finette. I'm the co-founder of Be Radical, a boutique consultancy firm which talks about the future. And today's session is about the future. So I hope I'm at the right spot. I'm also the chair for entrepreneurship and open innovation at Singularity University, a think tank out of Silicon Valley, where we think a lot about what the future will look like. And before we get into a deeply lively, super interesting conversation about the future in the industry, and as it seeps out into all the adjacent areas of our lives and our businesses, I want to give you a tiny little bit of framing of how we actually look at the future. And I think this will set us up nicely for the conversation we're going to have. We live in this interesting duality. When you think about the future, on one hand, there's a very strong argument to be made that the future is unknown. The future is invisible. It is unwritten. Every single day, we get a chance to rewrite this future. And also, it's really hard. It's essentially impossible to predict the future. So there is the one side of the world, which says the future, as it pertains to us, our businesses, our families, societies, is really unknown. And there's a concept in the futurist community called the cone of uncertainty. And the cone of uncertainty works a little bit like this, that imagine the further out you go into the future, the wider your space becomes of possible futures, of possibilities. And it creates this cone shape. And inside of this big cone of possibilities is a slightly smaller cone of probable futures. And as leaders in this world, it is our job to actually chart our course through this cone of probable and possible futures. So this is one side of the future. The second side of the future is to say what William Gibson once described as the future is already here. It is just unevenly distributed. Or as I like to say, the future has truly already happened. We're just trying to catch up. And what we mean by that is that, particularly when you look at technologies, for example, you typically can see the future already. You can experience the future way before it becomes mainstream. It, of course, happens first typically in the labs, the research organizations, and then it starts to trickle down into the trendy parts of the world where the early adopters are trying to figure out what this world will look like. And then eventually we all catch up. So it is imperative on us to, if we want to think about the future, to also sharpen our lens towards this. A good example for this is topics like virtual reality, surely a topic which has become more interesting and more important in this new world, which is shaped by the global pandemic we are now living in. Virtual reality has been around for a long time, and we could see virtual reality headsets for, decades. Now, of course, arguably, virtual reality is still not at a point where it's truly mainstream, but it has become closer to it. So we live in this world of dualities. We live in a world where future is unwritten and we don't know about it. We live in a world where we can see the future. And I do believe that as leaders, we need to figure this out. It's our job to do this. Now, I want to acknowledge a thing here, which is we're not only living in this duality of these two futures, we also live in a world of increasing uncertainty. And if COVID has taught us one thing, is that clearly it has put a wrench into anything you thought was certain. And has increased the level of uncertainty in which we're living dramatically. Now, here's the challenge with uncertainty. Uncertainty is something we don't like. As humans, most of us, we're hardwired to seek out certainty, to find the answers. Our school system even trains us in a world where you want to have the perfect answer. You want to get your grade A by providing the right answer. Yet we do live in a world of increasing uncertainty. And I'm pretty sure that this will not actually decrease. There will be more uncertainty in the world. And to just illustrate this point for a second, for you as the watcher being here on this stream, think about the following scenario. You're on your way to an important business meeting and it's across town. And you get in your car, and granted, hopefully we'll have in-person meetings soon again. But let's say you get in your car and you're on your way. And now you're hitting traffic. And now you hit one of two scenarios. Scenario number one is you're stuck in traffic and you just don't know when you will arrive. But you kind of think about you could make it. There's this uncertainty, this possibility of if you just squeeze into the left lane and squeeze in front of that truck and you run the yellow light instead of the green light, you might make it. That's scenario number one. So the wondering if you could do it. Scenario number two is you're stuck in traffic and you just know you will be 20 minutes late. All your navigation apps tell you there's no way on earth that you can make it. You will be 20 minutes late. Now ask yourself a simple question. What is more uncomfortable for you? What pains you internally more? What riles you up more? Scenario number one, wondering. Scenario number two, knowing you will be too late. And here's the thing, we've done this hundreds and hundreds of times with people, leaders all over the world. And the number one answer, 2/3 of people pretty consistently around the world, they say that wondering is more painful. Staying in the uncertainty is more painful. Now, here's the challenge with uncertainty. We don't like it because it doesn't allow us to find an answer. As I mentioned earlier, our schooling system, everything we know about the world, everything we've been taught is about a distinct answer. Now, the challenge is we're not living in that world anymore. And again, if COVID has taught us anything, clearly that's not the case anymore for the foreseeable future, at the very least. Now, that brings up my last point here. And then I want to open up for conversation because I want to really dig into this world of the future, of what happens in this world of 2021, where we finally left 2020 behind us, this horrible year. Now, here's the challenge. As Warren Berger in his book, A More Beautiful Question, very interestingly and rightfully points out, the value of discrete answers, of knowing a specific answer, actually decreases in a world of increasing complexity. Knowing is actually not quite as valuable anymore as we're moving into a world of complexity for all the reasons I just mentioned. Whereas asking better questions becomes the power skill, the super skill of the 21st century. And that brings us into this really interesting realm of changing the way we think about the future, changing the way we approach the future. So instead of seeking out answers, to seek the perfect answer, it is really imperative on us to open up the space by asking better questions. As Tina Seelig, she teaches a course over at Stanford called Question Storming, says, questions are the frames into which answers will fall. And with that being said, I want to open it up to a fantastic panel of four of truly the leading experts in their respective fields. And I'm just very, very curious to hear from all of you. And by the way we're going to structure this is going to be a dinner conversation. So we're not doing the panel thing where I'm going to ask questions, but we're going to have a great conversation between all of us. And I want to ask the panelists, knowing what we know and going to the discrete answer one last time, what do you think 2021? What do you know about 2021 as it pertains to your particular viewpoint on the industry is going to be true? What do you think is important for our audience to actually know? What is the thing you feel confident that if we have this conversation in a year from now, you will say, see, Pascal, I told you so. I knew this is going to happen. And if I can just open it up and probably, Lisa, if I can ask you, what do you think is going to be true for 2021, and what do we learn about this?
Yeah, thank you, Pascal. I think now that we're all comfortable, we can move forward, right? So I do think this overall. I think that it allows us to have huge opportunities. And I will tell you, I am probably less uncomfortable and more excited about those opportunities that we can look at for 2021. I think that we generally get into the comfort zone. This has taken us out of that comfort zone and really allowed us to start thinking about accelerating and what those opportunities are. I think the scary part about this is, not all of those opportunities are going to pan out, right? But it gives us an opportunity to explore that if we change our thinking in some of this, particularly for me, I think on how we do business, potentially even with all of our partners. So I'm excited about this. I don't know about the rest of the panel.
I might just chime right in if that's all right, Pascal. I mean, firstly, I have gotten past the point of wondering too much about what might come, because I think things won't go back to the way they were right now. We're in the stage of adapting. But the two things I can be, let's say, reasonably confident about, first is 2021 won't be worse than 2020, or at least, there's probably a lot more hope in that statement than there, as much hope as there is truth. It can only get better, right? And that probably what I said to do at the beginning of the year, we might do part of it and not all of it, depending on how things pan out. And, we've already, shelved every idea that we had in January 2020 and said, okay, let's start again. And if we were, beginning from scratch, then what does minimalist look like, right, for a travel company like ours? What do people really want? And so it's, I think, it does give us that opportunity to say, hang on, from scratch, what really matters? And so I think those two things are pretty sure for this year.
Yeah, I would agree, Marcus. On the other end, I think we're all getting used to this uncertainty in a positive way. First of all, we all learn how to react. I think majority of us did something. Very few in this sector and in this field stay standing still, just looking at, and waiting for the circumstances to pass by. I think especially we in the company, especially in our situation, we have to serve many clients. So opportunities, like Lisa was saying, are coming along, but they're coming along differently for one client or another. So what you can spot as a nice opportunity, Lisa, can be a challenge for another organization. So in our position, we are on one side on a preferred seat where we can see different situations. So bring the experience from one client to another, and also in the uncomfortable seat to try to really serve everyone as they deserve and at our best.
Thank you. So I would say first, Happy New Year. Excited that 2020 is behind us and that we are facing, what I agree is going to be exciting. So my first thought when I think of 2020 and the possibilities in 2021 is that we survived, right? So we all made it. And we probably thought in March, even though many of us thought it was going to be much shorter, and then June came, and then the summer came, and then we realized the holidays, but we made it. And so I think for all of us, it was an opportunity for us to move from sometimes what was transactional to more creativity and customization and, quite honestly, digging a lot deeper than we probably had to do the last 5 or 10 years. And I found that to be very exciting. And for many of us, especially our partners, it allowed us to kind of start from scratch, if you will, and roll up our sleeves and really form a partnership and be much more collaborative. But I also think what we learned in 2020, and I hope that we all carry it into 2021, is to listen. Right? We moved very fast, and a lot of times we listen to answer. And I think in 2020, at least for me, I really had to stop and listen to hear, because our customers were saying something completely different that I hadn't heard in 20, 25 years. And so it caused me to pause and say, okay, this is what they need. And so I need to move differently. But also, too, all of us on this Zoom as leaders, we also needed to listen differently to our staff and to our teams, and to help them, one, change their mindset if their skill set wasn't quite what it needed to be in this new situation that we found ourselves in. But then also, too, from a personal standpoint, we had to dig deeper into skills that we didn't necessarily have to use in the past to get them motivated or to get them back on track, or to get them in a more positive mindset. But then I think the last thing that we learned is that humanity was at its greatest last year, right? I mean, the things that we were able to accomplish as an industry, what we took away, what we thought was important, clearly was not last year. And what we turned our attention to, the very basic needs of humans, really became the highlight of 2020, and who would have thought? And so I think it was a great reset. But I agree with you. It holds a lot of possibilities. And of course, we all know that 2021 will start better than 2020.
I think the point you make is a good one, because I think, before this crisis, we were all, bombarded by different kinds of noise, physical noise, advertising, email, WhatsApp. It was just nonstop. And you were perpetuated, in fact, by that constant modern distraction, right? And initially, the crisis obviously caused us to have to react, in a very quick way, in a very violent way, to everything that was going on. But as the business slowed itself down, all of a sudden you had a lot of space, and you had more time to focus on the things which were important, whether they were about humanity in general, or about the business, or about your team. And that, those distractions that went away all of a sudden enabled you as well, from an opportunistic perspective, to sit back and say, well, what is important? At the end of all this, what do I actually want to retain of existing 12 months ago? And I love, there was a chocolate bar ad several years ago, and I think the catchphrase was "Undivided your attention." And I always remembered that catchphrase. It's a great catchphrase to say, how many times have we been in meetings when we're doing emails at the same time we're supposed to be watching a presentation, that all of a sudden, when you had less things to do, you started to just concentrate on stuff that was more important. And hopefully that'll be one of the things, that we keep asking ourselves.
Yeah, I do think there's a dichotomy there, though. However, for some of us, we had to move very quickly without maybe having a lot of time to think about it, and so that perpetuated some of that emotional piece of this. The other piece of this, I think, as leaders, as formally trained leaders, when we look at strategy, it completely changed the way that we look at strategy. The strategy from a 4 to 5 year plan now becomes maybe a 2 to 10 month plan, and what are we going to do in that time frame, and that strategy is going to change quite more frequently probably than we were comfortable with. And how do we prepare ourselves for that and our constituents as well, because at the end of the day, we're answering to all of those that we are trying to serve. So I think the emotional piece of it and came into a much larger play in how we move things forward. So very interesting times, I think.
I agree. And also, one of my reflections is what really changed in the supply chain in this world. I mean, in our sector, of course, because we have seen bad stories about, at the beginning it was about cancellation, it was about postponement, and not always this relationship with the entire supply chain, I have to say, weren't so easy. So I think that is definitely a big lesson to learn. Are we going to make our contract in the future? Because you say, all right, what is the future? The future for me has to be different also in this kind of perspective. I don't want to deal with, every one of us has a supply in the end, a supplier to deal with, okay, in the entire chain. And I do really want to look at collaboration, exactly as Julie was saying. Collaboration has to be different because we all learn that if there are circumstances like this behind the corner, we all have to be ready to react in a different way. So that no one particularly has to suffer. Because the entire sector, the entire environment where we live and act has to be safe together. So it's like when you say, opportunities have to be the same. Collaboration has to be different so that everyone will not just survive, Julie said, but possibly make it even better. So, and collectively we have to get there. Otherwise, there's no equality on this. There will be, we have seen, of course, technology companies, I suppose they have one of the best revenue in their life. While, of course, I would imagine, not to mention hotels. Sorry, Marcus, I think it's a year to forget, so to say. So let's all, here is my question. How can we do, my first question, Pascal, how can we do to make this more equal in the future so that we'll all survive together and not wasting relationship, but keep our, supplier friends and our client friends?
Yeah. Annalise, I do think, though, part of that is changing the overall mindset, right? So I think a lot of people are still in the mindset that things are just going to flip back to the way they were, right? So we waited for that to happen, the first month, the second month, the fifth month. Here we are 10, 11 months down the road. It's not just going to flip back to the way it was. And that's where I, have to be optimistic about it. But I think we also need to make sure we're all on the same page on that. And that I think that's a little challenging.
That brings up an interesting question, for me at least, which is from your perspective, and I probably, if we can do a quick round robin on this, what is it you have seen or believe is going to be a permanent change? We talk a lot about, like, in my work, we talk a lot about, let's say, for example, remote work as one of the examples in, like, broadly speaking. I guarantee you we'll never get back to the same levels of remote work, the low levels of remote work we had pre-pandemic, because clearly we now have seen it works, etc. In the overall event space, clearly there's also things which have shifted permanently. And I'm just really curious, like, from your individual perspectives, and you all bring a very different piece to this puzzle, what do you think is going to be like permanently changed, which is not going to go back to, how things were before?
I'll go first. And I'm hopeful of this. I think the first thing I would say that most of us, certainly appreciated about 2020, as Marcos talked about, in the beginning, there were a lot of meetings and it was just completely overwhelming. But we did get to a point in 2020 where we realized we were very much overscheduled, and we crammed a lot into a short amount of time that we didn't necessarily have to, and that the world doesn't necessarily end. So I think I'm hopeful that one of the things that we will take into the future in 2021 and beyond is to work smarter and not harder. And I think that we can. And I think that, the travel that we all did, and certainly, and obviously I'm in the industry, but just being smarter about it and how we do meetings, and do we need to have as many meetings that we've had in the past, especially internally, the number of emails, things of that sort. I think just communication on a whole, I'm hoping, will be much more streamlined and much more focused and intentional than it has been in the past. And in terms of work remotely, I completely agree. And I think that will lead to various changes. Obviously, for us, for example, our office is in the heart of downtown San Diego. And I know that there are a number of businesses that rely on downtown San Diego and those offices being filled. So that's a piece that we'll have to work through. But to say that everyone will come back into the office at the same level that they did is completely unrealistic. And we don't need to, because we were just as efficient working remotely. And when I think we broke down many barriers, from trust to communication to efficiency, that we should definitely keep in 2021 and beyond.
Interesting. Marcus, I'm curious, like from a hotel perspective, which clearly is, like you've been hit hard. I mean, it's like, let's acknowledge 2020 was not your best year. I'm curious, like, what do you think as a, like from a property perspective, like, what do you think is like the permanent change you're seeing in your industry?
Well, I mean, we were certainly hit hard, no doubt about that. There was a bit of a race between airlines, hotels, and cruise ships as to who would get to the bottom first. But hopefully we've turned that corner now. But I think there are obviously a couple of things that spring to mind. One is around space usage, and the other is around corporate social responsibility and some awareness that this crisis brought to the impact on the planet that we're having in general, probably because of a broader social consciousness around the fact that this type of pandemic in 2020 can still bring the entire planet to a standstill, raised broader questions around what we're doing to the planet, which have existed for a long, long time, and have had has had mixed audience from time to time as to the degree to which we were willing to make the necessary steps to ensure that we're in a sustainable industry and a sustainable lifestyle. But I think that will force acceleration to changes the way in which hospitality in general, hotels not only, but venues, the whole travel industry around products that are non-recyclable, things that are sourced a long way away, and to try and bring maybe some authenticity back to the experiences by sourcing more locally, by ensuring that single-use disposable plastics are a thing of the past, more quickly than was probably planned before. So I think there is an element of CSR and a consciousness that people have developed around food waste and things in general being wasteful, when they've realised in this pandemic situation that globalization hasn't been good for everybody by an equal measure. That's one of the things I hope will endure. The other thing which I think will come about no matter what, which goes in the similar direction to what Julie was saying around working from home, is just alternative uses of space. And hotels have been quick, I think, to start to discuss alternative uses of space for whether it's home officing or officing closer to your home so that you avoid having to commute, because you can just as well work at a distance. But if you don't physically have the space at home, where you've got young kids or lots of dogs, sometimes you actually need a space where you can work, in tranquility. And so that's one thing. There's a lot of meeting spaces in hotels that might need to be rethought as to what their longer term uses would be. And if you're not conducting so many physical, you might be transitioning those spaces into more broadcast studios so that you can professionalize hybrid events or digital events such as this one, and it's certainly something I think we need to look at. It's one of the questions that we're asking ourselves is, what do we do with this physical spaces that is existing?
Yeah, I would agree, especially because when you think, and when will the people be confident to meet again, as in the past? You have your personal perception. Now we say how unpolite was when you were meeting someone, you just now going across the road, just avoid to stay too close. In the past, you could never think about something like that. So mass events, but also mega meetings like big conferences, I really wonder when we will feel comfortable and safe again to meet in such a close environment, let's say. And that's one thing. And the other, I would agree, sustainability has to be very high in our agenda. Sustainability is something that we all have to consider one way or another. We are, for instance, making collaboration with obviously convention centers, but also offering any kind of ideas to the client on how to be more sustainable. Pairing up with a project, at least one project on sustainability for each event that they are going to organize in the future. And they're picking on this. They definitely want to pick on this. It can be anything. For instance, we had an initiative, very simple one. With each registration, we collect like €10 to plant a tree in an area. And we call it the such and such organization forest. And it's so nice. People feel attached to this. It's a common initiative. There are great organizations that are facilitating that. And you've got the feeling that you're doing something good, especially if this is linked to some social responsibility and opportunity you're offering to the people in the area where they are going to plant the trees. And this is only one example. And last thing, if I can pitch on the spaces in the convention center in the hotel, like Marco said, have to be organized differently so that everyone can find a little corner for smaller meetings, to be close with friends, but not necessarily feeling so much clustered in the middle of a big mass. So I think we need to think about individually and for the benefit of the individual back collectively.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, look, we've been talking about sustainability for quite a while now. This is another one of those accelerants that we're seeing, and that's going to be a great thing that comes out of this. In addition, for a medical society, right, we've been able to do some outreach to those that would have never attended our meeting. Our highest attended meeting so far has been our virtual meeting. And so I think that we're still going to be able to continue to do that outreach for those that can't attend. On the other hand, I will say there is still that value and that need for that personal interaction that we just cannot replicate from a virtual standpoint. How do we value that, right? Is there a way to change the value of that person-to-person interaction where it was sort of a given before? So I look at it that way because, again, I do think there are certain things that we won't be able to replicate, and we have to look at that as a value proposition.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you, Lisa. I think, and I think just travel in general, from friends and colleagues and coworkers, you do miss it. And you miss the ability just to travel, whether it's for a friend's weekend or, a business meeting or whatever that looks like. And so that has not gone away. And I think that, and I'm hopeful that we value the ability to travel at will even more so now because it was taken away, right? And so I do think, that will come back. But I agree with you, Lisa, face to face, there's just something intangible about that I don't think will ever be able to be replaced digitally. I think it can be enhanced by digital, but I don't think that it will ever be able to be replaced.
I'm curious on this point. I'm curious. So when we look at a bunch of the future scenarios we are running or colleagues of ours are running, Julie, to your point, what we're seeing very strongly is there's a strong belief, at least in the industry, that there is so much pent up like energy and demand that like the moment we're all vaccinated and like the limitations are lifted, we will see an absolute boom and surge in travel, etc. And I can tell you, like, I cannot wait to get safely back on a plane to do some more, at least the leisure travel. On the flip side of that, of course, you have like topics like I was just speaking to the leader at one of the big 4 consulting firms. They told me that they saved about $1 billion in travel cost last year. And now, granted, like they also lost some business due to that. They think that, to the earlier made point about like getting people together in person is super valuable. They can't do that, thus they lose business, etc. So they will not be at the level. They will surely not stay at the level they're currently at. But they're at the same time asking themselves, can we spend $500 million less on business travel, for example? Which brings up an interesting question for me, and I want to pose this probably a little bit as a question into the round, because I really don't have the answer to that. What felt to me when we went into 2020 and this whole lockdown stuff happened is we transitioned, at least on the event organizer side, very quickly into a digital space. And Lisa, you mentioned, like your biggest event was the one which was virtual. And I want to make the argument that, at least to a certain extent, we had the tools already there. Like companies like Zoom were around pre-pandemic. And, like many of these big event platforms were around pre-pandemic. And it was really about us getting comfortable with them and scaling them up and rolling them out to our members and our attendees. I'm curious, and I'm really personally racking my brain around this, is now that we have a taste of this, and at the same time, we also want to do the in-person version. And this word has been tossed around a couple times. Like, I do believe that 2021 will see the emergence of hybrid events. Like the idea of like, how do I get 10,000 people to watch it on a stream and at the same time have 500 people or whatever the number is inside of my hotel conference room? My gut feeling is we have no clue how to do that. Because like literally, I wouldn't even know where to start in terms even of technology. Like it really feels like that technology isn't even around. And I'm curious to hear from you. How do you think about this? And how do you is this an opportunity you're seeing? And how do you think about this?
Pascal, we're currently planning a hybrid for our 2021 meeting, unless things don't work out. But we don't necessarily know exactly what that looks like, and that is uncomfortable for a lot of people, right? So trying to figure that out right now is something that we're really jumping into. And again, I look at that as an opportunity, though, not so much as a challenge. And I think there's an expectation that if you're at the beginning of some of these, the expectation, I don't want to say is lower, but it's a little more forgiving. And then it's how do we build on all of that? So again, I'm looking at this as a great opportunity to work with our partners in collaboration to see how that can be done.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is we're going to have to look at it from a consumer standpoint, right? Because you're going to have attendees that are in person and you're going to have attendees like us that are virtual. And so how do you meet both of those needs? And to me, it's very different. I think we all can agree you can be on Zoom calls, but for so long. And at some point your attention is completely, somewhere else. Whereas, being in person, you feed off the energy of that speaker, so Pascal, this would be a completely different experience for us if we were watching you and you were on stage and, you were moving, we would be, much more engaged than let's say on the screen. And so we are, as Lisa said, going to have to work through that together, because you do want to make sure that both of the expectations and the needs of both of those two attendees are different. We even have things like we talked about earlier before the call, time zones, right? So if a meeting starts at 10 a.m. on the East Coast, it's 7 a.m. for me. And for some parts of the country, it's 3 a.m. So how do you balance that? And let's not forget, and we haven't spoken a lot about that, we still have a very divide when it comes to technology and bandwidth in individuals' homes. Not everyone has the same strength of bandwidth and technology accessible to them, I guess is the right word. And that changes your experience as well. And that's within the US, and that's also across the globe. And so how do we level that playing field as well? So the experience, and we saw it in our schools, right? There were many homes who didn't have laptops. And so how did children learn and things like that? And there's a lot for us to work through. And I think we can do it collaboratively, but there's a lot for us to work through as partners. I think that'll be extremely important in 2021.
I have to say there is a bit of confusion on what hybrid means. And it's a mix between digital, virtual, and hybrid event. And I think what everybody needs to think first is about the design of the meeting and what works when you go hybrid. I guess, and I'm sure because Lisa, with your association, you have been broadcasting from your event even before the pandemic. And that was not considered an hybrid event.
No,
it was
no.
simply with the idea that you want to enhance your sessions, you want to reach out to a bigger audience, and so on and so on. So that's not a hybrid event. A hybrid event has to be conceptually completely different. You have
Correct.
to accept the fact that some people can be located in different hubs and perhaps flip the idea of where the main event is taking place. Playing with this, I think is fascinating me, and I have to find a client, whoever is there outside, come and do this experiment with me. I want to have a multi-hub hybrid event, really, where the audience is flipped around, and you might decide that you have a free dimension. In addition to that, I have to say, okay, we talk about Zoom. That fits with Zoom. I mean, Zoom is not a concept of the digital event. We are now entering the second phase where technology has to be at the higher level, where you entertain your people from home only if you introduce a piece of virtual reality, where everything is perfect. You bring your speaker at least, I would say, in a green room. You have to introduce these, I know it's complicated and it's very expensive. I've been through the exercise. I know exactly what it looks like. You have to have special studios, but I really hope that at the higher level, we start to introduce this kind of new technology, understand that we are not entertaining people through a Zoom gathering anymore. And there will always be someone who is the trailblazer. Starting with this, and others will follow. Another important piece is what's going to happen at the venues. Hotels or venues, whatever, they have to be collaborative. There must be a preset AV equipment, all these kinds of, the basic facility have to be there. Connecting venue, for instance, I think sort of a network of venues that are all with the same level of technology ready to be connected in a very short time with no much cost for the client. That's the future that I see in our industry. It's absolutely the direction we have to go.
That level of complexity, when you're talking about multi-destination events happening simultaneously, we're almost reaching sort of Olympic Games level coordination in terms of the technology required, but also flipping from one venue to another venue, where you've then got always the physical audience in the respective venue and the rest of the audience virtually. The other part of the hybrid is the degree to which the people who are not in the host venue are able to interact with what's going on in the host venue, because that always, I've been to several meetings where there are 3 or 4 of us together, and there's 1 or 2 people who are on Zoom or Teams. And for the 1 or 2 people who are virtual, there's a time lag. It's never a great experience as the others who are physically together. So, we can't replace the physically together part for all the logistical reasons we mentioned. But at the end of the day, I think there is going to be hybrid, and there is going to be virtual to some extent. So technology will certainly enable us to catch up. And unlike the GFC and other crises that have passed, where it wasn't that well installed and embedded everywhere that we just kept going with it, this time, you've either got Blue Jeans, or you've got Team, or you've got Zoom, or you've got something else. It will sustain itself, and it will certainly make its way into meetings as mainstream, I would think.
Talking about, so super interesting, and also talking about Annalisa, I think you all mentioned the word Zoom fatigue, and I want to acknowledge the fact that we are not quite on Zoom, but we are on a digital platform, and I wanted to thus acknowledge the fact that the people who are listening to this conversation might experience a tiny bit of fatigue, though I have a hard time imagining this with such wonderful participants as you. So let me bring this to a close. And I want to do this with a very last question. And I want to do just a super quick round of comments from each one of you. What are you excited about 2021 as it pertains to the industry? Like single sentence, 2 sentences. What is it? What gets you super fired up about it? And probably, again, like as more of a consumer of services in this industry, I have to say for myself and my team, we are truly excited about the exact topic we just discussed, which is hybrid events. And because there truly is a future which is unwritten. And I think it's, to Annalisa's point, is a future we boldly have to step into and just experiment with. And I'm really excited about that. Probably from the other panel participants, what are you excited about 2021?
Well, I'm excited about all the opportunities that are out there. I think including mainly, Pascal, as you mentioned, hybrid, but I think there are many, many opportunities for us.
I'm excited, honestly, about getting back on the road. It's been a long time. I've seen some of my colleagues, some of my friends, some of my great clients. And as much as I've enjoyed home officing and I love my kids, I do enjoy travel as a personal experience. And for all the reasons mentioned, getting out and seeing a destination is part of what I'm about. Part of what I think a lot of people are about, and I just want to get back out on the road.
I'm excited about the blank canvas, right? And I think we do. I think we have just a blank canvas, and it's been a long time in our industry that we've had the opportunity to just recreate, reinvent, and ourselves. And I'm excited about that. I think it's time, and it's unfortunate that it had to come to this, but I'm just excited that there's a blank canvas for us to recreate what the future looks like for our industry.
Annalisa, you've got the closing word. So all the pressure on you.
What a responsibility, exactly, because we have to leave with a positive message. We have to close with a positive message. And I think that emotion, okay, I'm looking forward to emotion. I'm looking forward to designing a meeting where technology and emotion can work hand in hand. It was possibly the most difficult thing to try to transmit. As I say, virtual reality can be there, you can be very technical, but to transmit emotion through technology, that's the challenge for everyone. That's my challenge for all our audience.
I love that. And with that being said, the question I have for the audience is, to say it in Julie's words and combining everything which has been said before, what is the blank canvas you find yourself in front of it? What is the picture you want to paint of it? Make it an emotional one, as I couldn't agree more with Annalisa. Make it one which is full of opportunity, as Lisa has pointed out. And I personally cannot agree more with Marcus. I also am dying to get back and travel At least some of it, not all of it. I think we all have the missed connection flight where we're sitting in like row 22 in the middle aisle seat, and it's just awful. Those I don't miss, but all the other ones I do miss very, very much. So thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. You took as much out of it as I did. 2021 will be truly interesting. It is full of opportunities. And with that being said, create that future. Create the future you want to see. Because if you don't, the future will happen to you. And that is not a particularly nice place to be. Thank you so much.